He used to think luck was something that happened to other people, until the letter in his trembling hands said otherwise. The wind outside the post office cut through his coat like a knife, and the paper fluttered as if it wanted to escape the moment. Michael stood there under the flickering fluorescent light, staring at the black printed words that didn't make sense. "Congratulations," it said. "You've been selected as the winner of the County Restoration Program's Homestead Grant. A farm," it said, "an abandoned property, yours to restore." He blinked, half expecting the ink to dissolve into nothing, because good things didn't happen to men who'd been sleeping in the back of their trucks for 3 months. But the address was real, the stamp official. He looked at Jonah beside him, the boy's small hands wrapped around a cup of gas station cocoa, steam fogging his freckled face. "What's wrong, Dad?" the boy asked softly. Michael swallowed hard. "I think," he said slowly, "we just got lucky." Jonah tilted his head. "Like, really lucky?" Michael managed a smile that didn't quite fit his face. Maybe the kind that doesn't make sense yet. That night, they sat in the truck, parked beneath a highway overpass, the wind howling like an animal in the distance. The boy held the letter like a secret treasure. "It says we own a farm," he whispered. "Our own?" "Looks that way," Michael said, staring out at the dark. "An abandoned one, though, probably falling apart." Jonah grinned anyway, his eyes full of the kind of hope Michael had long forgotten how to carry. "We can fix it," he said. "We can make it ours." Michael looked at his son and thought of all the nights they'd counted coins to buy food, all the times he'd said, "maybe tomorrow," because he didn't want to say no. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we'll fix it." The road to the farm wound through miles of bare trees and forgotten fields. The sky, the color of tin. The truck rattled over potholes, coughing every few miles like it might give up before they reached the end. A sign leaning in the ditch read, "Property of Pine Hollow County." Michael followed the dirt track until the forest gave way to open land, and there it was. The farm stood in the middle of it all like a memory that refused to die, a house with peeling white paint, a leaning barn, fences split by time. The fields were overgrown, golden with weeds that swayed in the cold wind. Jonah pressed his face to the window, eyes wide. "It's huge," he whispered. "And it's ours?" "Ours," Michael said, though the word felt too fragile to speak. The tires crunched to a stop near the porch. He stepped out into silence, so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke and the faint tang of rust. Jonah jumped down beside him, boots sinking into the soft ground. "It's like something from a story," he said, running ahead toward the porch. The boards groaned beneath his weight, but they held. Michael followed, running his hand along the rail. The paint flaked away like dry skin, revealing the raw wood beneath. The front door was unlocked. It opened with a sigh, as if exhaling the years it had been left alone. Dust drifted through the light, spilling in from broken windows. Inside, everything was still. A table stood covered in a film of gray. A single chair lay overturned. On the far wall hung a clock. Its hand stopped at 4:17. Michael stepped inside cautiously, his boots echoing. "Hello?" he called. His voice came back to him, soft and hollow. Jonah peered around him, eyes bright with curiosity. "Nobody's here," he said, almost disappointed. "That's kind of the point," Michael replied with a smile. The house smelled faintly of hay and rain. The floors creaked but held steady. In the corner sat an old wood stove, its pipe still intact, a small mercy. Jonah wandered through the rooms, narrating everything he saw: the crooked staircase, the cracked mirror, the coat rack still holding a single moth-eaten jacket. Michael followed in silence, taking it all in. Each room felt like a ghost, frozen mid-breath. Upstairs, sunlight leaked through holes in the roof, painting the floor in shifting shapes. In one room, they found a bed frame still made up with yellowed sheets. Jonah sat on it, sending up a puff of dust. "It's not so bad," he said cheerfully. "Could use some cleaning." "Could use a miracle," Michael muttered, but the boy didn't hear. They spent the rest of the morning walking the property. The barn door hung open, the hinges squealing like something alive. Inside, hay bales had collapsed into heaps of dry straw. A rusted tractor sat in the corner, its tires cracked. Tools still hung neatly on the wall, untouched for years. Michael ran his fingers over the handles, feeling the smooth wear from hands that once worked this land. Whoever had owned it before had left in a hurry or maybe just given up. Jonah found a nest of kittens tucked beneath a pile of old blankets. Their eyes blinked up at him, curious and unafraid. "Can we keep them?" he asked eagerly. Michael sighed, but couldn't bring himself to say no. "Let's see if they stick around," he said. The boy grinned, his face lighting up. "We can name them." Michael laughed quietly, surprised at the sound. It had been a long time since laughter felt natural. When they returned to the house, the sun was already dipping behind the trees, painting the sky in muted orange. Michael set up the small camping stove they'd brought and heated a can of soup. They sat on the porch steps, sharing it straight from the pot, the steam curling into the cold air. "You think someone used to be happy here?" Jonah asked suddenly. "Yeah," Michael said. "You can feel it in the air." The boy nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. Later, as night fell and the temperature dropped, they curled up near the wood stove wrapped in blankets. The fire crackled softly, throwing long shadows across the walls. Jonah fell asleep quickly, his small hand clutching one of the kittens against his chest. Michael watched him, heart heavy with a strange mix of gratitude and fear. He looked around the dim room and whispered, "We'll make it work, I promise." The flames answered with a soft pop, as if agreeing. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of work and quiet. Each morning, Michael rose before dawn, his breath fogging in the cold, and set about patching holes, sweeping, hauling debris from the yard. Jonah helped in his own way, fetching nails, holding the flashlight, chasing Rusty, who had quickly made the kittens his new obsession, around the field. The house began to wake up. The walls stopped groaning so much. The air smelled less of dust and more of wood smoke and soap. Every small improvement felt like an act of defiance against the life they left behind. One afternoon, while clearing the barn, Michael found a locked trunk buried beneath a pile of feed sacks. The wood was dark with age, the lock rusted but solid. He stared at it for a long time, then called Jonah over. "Look at this," he said. The boy's eyes widened. "Treasure chest." "Maybe," Michael said with a smile. He pried at the lock with a crowbar until it gave with a crack. The lid creaked open. Inside were old papers, photographs, and a small metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Michael lifted it out carefully. The box was heavier than it looked. He unwrapped it, revealing a stack of letters tied with string and a tarnished key. Jonah leaned close. "What's that for?" "No idea," Michael said, turning it in his fingers. The letters smelled of old ink and rain. He untied the string and opened the first one. The handwriting was neat, elegant. "To whoever finds this," it began. "This land has more stories than years. If you've come to make it live again, listen to what it's trying to tell you. I buried my regrets near the apple tree by the west fence. Some are made of words, some of gold. You'll know the difference when you see it. Michael read it twice, trying to make sense of it. The rest of the letters were dated across several decades, each written by a different hand, but always signed the same way, with a simple initial H. Some spoke of harvests, others of loss. One described a fire that had nearly destroyed the barn. Another talked about a child born in the upstairs bedroom during a snowstorm. Each letter was a fragment of a life long gone, but together they felt like the heartbeat of the place itself. "You think it's true?" Jonah asked. "Buried treasure?" Michael smiled faintly. "Maybe not the kind you spend. Then what kind?" "The kind you remember," he said. That night, they stood by the west fence, under a sky full of stars. The apple tree stood crooked but alive, its branches bare. Michael held the small key, feeling its cold weight. "Guess we find out," he said. He dug into the soil at the base of the tree, the dirt soft and damp. After a few minutes, the shovel struck something solid. A tin box, smaller than a shoebox, coated in rust. Jonah gasped. "You found it!" Michael pried it loose, brushing away the dirt. The lock was simple, old. He slid the key into it, and it turned easily. Inside was a single envelope and a small wooden cross. He opened the envelope. The handwriting was faded, almost illegible. "For whoever comes next," it said. "This land broke us and healed us. If you've found this, then maybe you know both kinds of pain. Don't sell it. Don't run. Stay long enough to hear it breathe again." Michael's eyes blurred. He set the letter down carefully, staring at the wooden cross. "What's wrong, Dad?" Jonah asked. Michael shook his head. "Nothing, buddy. I think someone else loved this place as much as we will." He looked out over the field, the moonlight silvering the weeds, and for the first time, he saw not ruin, but possibility. The next morning, Jonah woke him early, excitement buzzing in his voice. "The kittens are gone," he said. They searched the barn, the porch, even under the truck, but found no sign. Rusty barked toward the field, tail wagging. "Maybe they just wandered off," Michael said. But Jonah frowned. They were too little. He followed the dog's gaze toward the edge of the woods, where the grass bent in a strange pattern as if something had passed through recently. Michael felt a chill creep up his neck. "Stay here," he said, but the boy trailed behind him anyway. They walked toward the trees, the morning fog curling low to the ground. Halfway there, they saw it, a piece of fabric caught on a branch. It looked like a sleeve, frayed and stained. Michael froze. "Dad?" Jonah whispered. Michael took the fabric, turning it over. It was part of a coat. Old, weather-beaten, but not ancient. Maybe left by someone who'd been there recently. His eyes drifted toward the deeper woods. "Let's head back," he said quietly. Jonah hesitated but obeyed. Back at the house, Michael locked the door and checked the windows, his pulse steady but high. He told himself it was probably nothing hunters, drifters, anyone passing through. But when he glanced again at the letter and its warning not to run, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching. That night, as the wind picked up and the trees swayed like restless souls, Michael sat by the fire, staring at the wooden cross on the table. Jonah had fallen asleep with Rusty curled at his feet. The house creaked softly, but beneath it was something else, a rhythm, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of the land itself. He realized then that maybe the letters hadn't just been stories. Maybe they were instructions, promises, warnings. He whispered to the dark, "I'm listening." The wind outside rose in answer, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something older. And in that moment, Michael knew the farm had more to tell. The storm rolled in before dawn, a low growl that shivered through the barn walls and rattled the loose panes in the kitchen window. Michael woke to the sound of rain striking the roof in sharp bursts. For a moment he lay still, listening to the rhythm of it, the way it mixed with the deep, steady breathing of his son and the occasional sigh of the sleeping dog. The house had begun to feel different, less like a ruin, more like something half awake, stretching old bones. He rose quietly and fed the fire until it caught again, watching the sparks dance in the dim light. Outside, the world had turned to gray mist. Jonah stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Is it morning?" he murmured. "Almost," Michael said. "Storm got here first." The boy crawled out from under his blanket, clutching the wooden cross they'd found. "You think the rain's gonna wash away the clues?" he asked sleepily. Michael smiled. "Some things stay buried for a reason." Jonah nodded, but didn't seem convinced. They ate oatmeal heated on the stove, the air thick with the scent of smoke and damp wood. When the wind eased, Michael pulled on his coat. "I'm going to check the barn," he said. Jonah frowned. "Can I come?" "Not this time," Michael said gently. "Keep Rusty company." The boy sighed but obeyed. Outside, the ground squelched underfoot, the fields glimmering with puddles. The barn loomed ahead, its red paint washed to rust, doors shuddering in the gusts. Michael pushed them open, stepping into the cool dark. The smell of hay and rain mixed with something faintly metallic. He checked the stalls, the loft, the corners. Nothing but the soft drip of water from the rafters. Then, as he turned to leave, he noticed a square of floorboards near the far wall that looked newer, lighter. He knelt, tracing the edges with his fingertips. They'd been replaced recently. His pulse quickened. He pried one up with the crowbar. Beneath lay a hollow space, and inside that, another box larger than the one by the apple tree, made of iron and sealed tight. He heaved it out, grunting with the effort, and set it down on the hay. The lock was rusted but intact. He struck it with a crowbar once, twice, until it gave with a metallic crack. Inside were stacks of envelopes, bound together with twine, and a small notebook wrapped in oilcloth. He lifted the notebook first, unwrapping it carefully. The pages were thick and yellowed, filled with slanted handwriting. The first entry was dated 1952. "If you're reading this, the land has chosen you next. Every generation, it tests whoever dares to call it home. It takes something before it gives anything back. Remember that." Michael turned the page. The entries chronicled years of droughts, births, storms, and deaths, each marked by the same hand, until decades later another handwriting took over. That voice was angrier, frightened. They came again. Men with maps, said the soil's rich with minerals, wanted to buy it out cheap, told them, no, they won't stop. If they can't buy it, they'll take it. The final pages were smudged with water stains, the words fading into indecipherable scratches. He closed the book, the weight of it heavy in his hands. So the farm had been more than just abandoned. It had been defended, lost, hidden. He looked at the envelopes, each labeled with a name. Families he didn't know, maybe the ones who'd lived here before. One was addressed simply, "To the next caretaker." He opened it. Inside was a short letter and an old photograph. The letter read, "We couldn't keep it, but maybe you can. The land isn't cursed. It's just waiting for someone who will listen without fear. If you build here, build with honesty. The rest will come back on its own." Michael stared at the photograph. It showed the same farmhouse, decades younger, bright with fresh paint and sunlight. In front stood a man, a woman, and a little girl holding a basket of apples. Behind them, the barn door was open, and inside, faintly visible, was something metallic, a glint that caught the camera's light like a secret waiting to be told. He frowned. The same spot where he'd just found the box. "Dad?" The voice behind him made him jump. Jonah stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hair. "I told you to stay inside," Michael said, trying to sound stern. The boy looked sheepish. The wind was loud. "I got scared." Michael sighed and smiled despite himself. "Come on, then." "I found something." He showed Jonah the notebook and photograph. The boy studied the faces. "She kinda looks like Mom," he said softly. Michael froze. It had been a long time since Jonah had said her name or anything close to it. "Maybe a little," he said. "You remember what she always said about pictures?" "That they're pieces of time," Jonah said. "And that they don't stop talking if you look long enough." Michael nodded. "Smart woman, your mom." They carried the box back to the house, setting it by the hearth to dry. As they sat, the wind began to die down, leaving behind the soft hiss of rain on the roof. Jonah curled up with Rusty, reading the notebook aloud in a halting voice, while Michael patched a leak above the window. The boy's voice filled the room like music, hesitant but alive. When he reached the line about listening without fear, he stopped and looked up. "You think the land can really talk?" he asked. Michael thought about it. "Maybe not in words," he said. "But everything living has a way of answering if you pay attention." Jonah nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. The following morning dawned clear and cold. The fields washed clean. Steam rose from the earth as sunlight touched the wet grass. Michael decided to walk the property line to see how far it stretched. Jonah insisted on coming, the dog bounding ahead like a scout. They passed the apple tree, the west fence, and followed the slope down toward the creek. The water shimmered, pale and fast. Across it stood an old storage shed half collapsed under vines. "Think there's more treasure?" Jonah asked. Michael laughed. "Only one way to find out." The door was wedged shut, but a few hard tugs broke it free. Inside was the smell of rust and rain-soaked earth. Wooden crates lined the walls, their labels faded. He opened one, tools, another, jars of nails and bolts. Then, in the back corner, half buried under straw, something else, an old safe, its door slightly ajar. He pulled it open. Inside lay a bundle of documents tied with red ribbon, and beneath them, a small velvet pouch. He untied the pouch. Coins spilled into his palm, gold, old, each stamped with dates from nearly a century ago. Jonah's eyes widened. "We're rich!" he exclaimed. Michael smiled but shook his head. "Not rich, buddy, just lucky." He looked closer at the papers, bank statements, property deeds, even letters of sale signed by families long gone, all proof of ownership, all history that had somehow survived every storm. He realized then what his grandfather's letter in the previous life might have meant, that sometimes the real treasure isn't wealth, but proof that you belong somewhere. They took the pouch and the papers back to the farmhouse. Michael laid them carefully on the table and looked out the window at the land stretching beyond the fence line. It no longer looked abandoned. It looked waiting. That night, they celebrated with what little they had, a can of beans and 2 apples Jonah had found still clinging to the tree. The boy raised his spoon solemnly. "To the farm," he said. Michael smiled and lifted his own. "To new beginnings." The firelight flickered across their faces, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning just for them. Later, after Jonah fell asleep, Michael sat outside on the porch, listening to the hum of the night. The stars glowed sharp and cold above. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. He thought of the letters, the coins, the families who'd come and gone, and he thought of the warning in the notebook that the land tested whoever claimed it. He wondered what it would ask of him. Over the next few weeks, life began to take on rhythm. Michael repaired the barn roof, replaced window panes, tilled a small patch of soil where the weeds had thinned. Jonah spent his days exploring the creek, collecting smooth stones and talking to Rusty as if the dog could answer back. The house filled with small sounds, again the scrape of chairs, the clink of dishes, the laughter of a boy rediscovering safety. One afternoon, as Michael was clearing the attic, he found another photograph tucked inside a stack of old magazines. It showed the same man from the first photo, standing beside a large machine, some kind of water pump, with a caption scrawled on the back. "The well will keep it alive." Curious. He climbed down and walked toward the barn. Behind it, half hidden by brush, he found a covered well, its stones slick with moss. The crank handle was rusted stiff. He forced it, and after several tries, the bucket dropped into the darkness below. When he hauled it up again, the water it carried was clear as glass. He took a sip. It was cold and sweet. He filled a small jar and brought it inside, setting it on the windowsill where the sunlight caught it. For a moment, it shone like a jewel. Jonah stared at it, wide-eyed. "Magic water," he whispered. "Maybe," Michael said, smiling. "Maybe it's just good land remembering how to give." That evening, as they sat by the fire, Jonah asked, "Do you think we'll stay here forever?" Michael hesitated. "I think we'll stay as long as it lets us." The boy frowned. "What do you mean?" "Places like this," Michael said slowly. "They don't belong to us. We belong to them. We just have to take care of them until someone else does." Jonah nodded thoughtfully. "Then we better do a good job." "We will," Michael said. "Promise." The wind picked up outside, whistling through the trees. The sound was softer now, less like warning, more like song. The weeks turned into months. Spring came quietly, melting the frost, coaxing green from the soil. The fields began to breathe again. The apple tree budded with pale blossoms, and the air smelled sweet for the first time in years. One morning, Michael woke to laughter outside. Jonah was running through the field, Rusty chasing him, both leaving trails through the dew. Michael stood on the porch watching them, and something inside him shifted a deep, settling peace that came from knowing he'd finally stopped running. Later that day, as they dug a small garden near the fence, Jonah's shovel hit something hard. "Another box?" he shouted excitedly. Michael knelt beside him, brushing away the dirt. It wasn't a box, but a stone marker, carved with words worn smooth by time. He traced them with his fingers until the message emerged. "For those who stay." Beneath it, etched faintly, was a date 1901. Michael stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. "Guess it's official," he said. "What is?" Jonah asked. "We're part of the story now." They planted seeds around the stone that afternoon. Beans, tomatoes, a few flowers Jonah insisted on. Every day after, they watered them together, watching the first shoots break through the soil. By the time summer came, the garden was alive, buzzing with bees and color. The farm no longer felt like a forgotten corner of the world. It felt like a heartbeat. On the first warm night of July, they sat on the porch, eating fresh vegetables from their own soil. Fireflies drifted through the fields like sparks. Jonah leaned against his father's arm. "You think Mom can see us?" he asked softly. Michael looked at the sky. "Yeah," he said, "and I think she's proud." The boy smiled. "Then we did it." "We did," Michael said. Silence settled between them, the kind that doesn't need filling. The stars blinked overhead, steady and patient. In the distance, the wind moved through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of apples. The farm had changed them, or maybe it had simply reminded them who they'd been all along. When Michael finally stood, stretching, he looked out over the fields one last time before heading in. The farmhouse glowed warmly behind him, the garden humming softly in the dark. He whispered into the night, "Thank you." The air stirred gently, almost like an answer. Inside, Jonah was already asleep. The dog curled at his feet. Michael lay down on the couch, listening to the creak of the settling house and the steady whisper of the wind outside. He thought of the letter that had started it all, the miracle that had arrived in a folded envelope when everything else had fallen apart. Some might have called it chance. But sitting there in the glow of a home reborn, he understood what his grandfather had meant in those old letters, that sometimes the land chooses you, not the other way around. He closed his eyes, the smell of earth and wood smoke filling the room. For the first time in years, he didn't dream of leaving. He dreamed of roots, of staying, of mornings filled with light. And outside, under the wide, quiet sky, the farm finally breathed easy again.